or any time in the past, put those thoughts aside. You can always pick them up again later if you need to, but really try to make sure that during the time we are together, during this class, you can keep your mind focused on what we are doing and not distracted elsewhere. And paying attention to your breathing is a helpful way of settling your mind in the present moment, in the present place, wherever you are. We'll spend a few minutes doing that. Just be aware of the natural rhythm of the breath as it's flowing in and flowing out. And you might want to imagine that each time you exhale, you're letting go of any remaining tension in your body. Breathe that tension out and let it disappear in space. So with each breath, you're becoming more and more relaxed. And then let's think about our reason for being here, for participating in this course. If you're familiar with the bodhicitta motivation, the aspiration to become fully enlightened or fully awakened, a Buddha, to be able to benefit all other beings in the best possible way, you can take that as your reason, your motivation. You're here to learn more about what you need to do to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. If any of you are not familiar with that motivation, try to bring into your mind as much feelings of compassion, love, kindness for others that you're able to feel. We all do feel the wish to help others, at least sometimes. So bring that wish, that feeling into your mind. Feel how nice it would be if you could help others to be free of suffering or to have less suffering and greater peace and happiness. And then you can think that is your reason for being here, to learn ways in which you can make your life beneficial for others. Now, imagine in the space in front of you, a Buddha made of light, a figure made completely of light, transparent and radiant, very beautiful, blissful. And don't worry if you're not able to visualize very perfectly or clearly. Just do the best you can. Try to at least feel that the Buddha is there in the space in front of you with all his excellent qualities, his compassion, love, his wisdom, his determination to help you and every other living being to be free of all suffering and achieve perfect peace and happiness up to enlightenment. And from the Buddha's heart, rays of light flow down and enter you, come into you, and fill your body completely. All the parts of your body, down to the tiniest particles, like cells, molecules, atoms, all become filled with light, blissful, radiant light. This light represents the Buddha's knowledge, qualities, realizations in the form of light. As they fill you, imagine your negative energy getting purified, your delusions, your afflictions, your suffering, karma. So all those things get purified. And your positive potential, your potential to develop the same good qualities as the Buddha has, those are nourished, like pouring water on seeds so that they can grow. So that those qualities get the energy they need to be able to grow and develop, become bigger and stronger. So let's recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times while doing that visualization. Ayata Om Mune Mune Maha So Ayata Om Mune I really try to feel your mind has been blessed by this visualization, the recitation of the mantra, the light flowing into you, so that the positive potential you have to develop excellent qualities like compassion, love, wisdom, and so on. This is nourished so that it can grow more and more quickly and easily. Okay. Before I forget, and if some of you haven't noticed, there's a little booklet that I wrote on this topic. I think it's called Preparing for Death and Helping the Dying. And I sent that to Shantideva Center, and I believe they put it on their website. So that's something you can download and read. It includes some of the material that I'm talking about during this course, but some additional material as well. So it's just something that gives you more material on this topic that you may be interested in. Okay, so last week in last session, we looked at some of the Buddhist views or Buddhist perspectives about death and dying. And I also talked about impermanence, the changing nature of things. And we did a short meditation on impermanence. And I had asked Sheila and Sunny to email you something a few days ago, or I think it was last Friday, just asking you to try to look for signs of impermanence in your daily life. I don't know if any of you got that email and had the time to do that. It may be something we don't normally notice, but it's there all the time. You know, like, for example, leaves falling from trees or flowers growing. You know, they weren't there the day before, and then today they're growing. So if we pay attention, then we can notice signs of impermanence, how things are subject to change, how they do change. Yeah. So this is very much a truth, a reality, but it's something we maybe normally don't notice, don't pay attention to, but it's very helpful to do that. It helps us to be gradually more familiar with the reality of impermanence, and that can help us to become more accepting of the truth of impermanence, and that in turn helps us become more accepting of death. So it's a gradual process. So today we will start looking at how to meditate on death and how to learn to be more accepting of death. But before we get into that, let's look at the benefits of doing so. So if the slides can be put up on the screen. That's first slide. Benefits of being mindful of death. So this comes from the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, where there's a whole section on meditating on death and impermanence, and it mentions some benefits of doing so. And this is helpful because we probably feel some resistance to this whole topic of death and dying, and our mind doesn't feel so inclined to think about death. Just the opposite. We want to kind of avoid this topic. But Buddhism says it's very beneficial if we do contemplate death and try to keep it in mind, be mindful that we're going to die. So there's this list of 6 benefits. The first is that our actions will become very beneficial. So one of the things I mentioned last week is that thinking about death or having some kind of encounter with death can cause us to think about life and realize that life isn't so stable as we might think, and it's actually quite fragile, and it can end at any time. We don't know when. And so this gets us to think about, well, what's the purpose of life? What is important to do in life? And what isn't important to do? And so hopefully this contemplation that, we're going to die will help us realize that what's important in life is to be a good person, try to be the best person we can be helpful and kind, compassionate to others as much as we can, not be mean, nasty, and harmful to others. And then for those who are inclined towards spirituality, then contemplating death can help us, become more enthusiastic about doing spiritual practice like meditation and other practices. And so, so if we do it in the correct way, if we are mindful of death in the correct way, then this will be the outcome, that it will lead us to act and live our lives in ways that are meaningful and beneficial. And that will be good for us, but also good for others, good for the world. And then number 2, your spiritual practice will become very powerful. So in Buddhism, and I think the same is true for other religions as well, spiritual practice, like, living ethically, doing prayers, meditation, and so on, is a very important aspect of life. And if you do already have an interest in doing spiritual practice, then having awareness of death, the fact that we're not going to be here forever, our life will come to an end at some point, we don't know when. So this becomes a strong, energizing force for our spiritual practice. It helps us to avoid being lazy, complacent, not having much energy for spiritual practice. So it can happen, like many people, when they first learn the Dharma, they first learn meditation, they may have a lot of enthusiasm. They really want to do a lot of practice, learn a lot of things, and so on. But then sometimes that energy can wane and decrease over time. And, after a few years, maybe we don't have the same amount of energy, and we may even lose energy altogether and want to give up our study and our practice. So this can happen, but the correct, proper way of contemplating impermanence and death will help us to avoid that problem, help us to keep ourselves enthusiastic to continue doing our spiritual practice. Number 3, it is important at the beginning of your practice. So for many people, some sort of awareness of death or encounter with death is actually the start of their spiritual practice. It's the thing that gets them interested in spiritual practice to begin with. Like they lose a loved one, or they themselves have some injury or illness or surgery, and that kind of wakes them up to how life is not so certain and stable, and that I'm going to die. And then that, for many people, leads them to be interested in spiritual practice, learning spiritual teachings and doing spiritual practice. So it's a strong motivating factor at the beginning of our practice. Then number 4, it's important in the middle of our practice. So in the middle of our practice, that's when our energy can wane, as I mentioned earlier, that, we start off with a lot of energy, but after a few years, we just become sort of mediocre, lukewarm. Our energy, our interest in spiritual practice may not be so strong anymore. But if we really think about how important spiritual practice is to prepare ourselves for death, to be able to die in a peaceful and positive way, and we just don't know when that is going to happen, then those kind of thoughts will help us to get ourselves back on track, back into having a lot of energy for our practice, so that we keep going and don't give up. Number 5 is it's important at the end of your practice. So the end of the practice really means enlightenment. We have to keep practicing until we're enlightened. It's not that we only practice for a few months and a few years, and then we say, okay, I've done enough now. But according to Buddhism, we keep practicing until we have completely purified our mind of all the afflictions, all the causes of suffering, and have developed all the realizations and qualities, all the causes of happiness up to enlightenment. So it's something we keep doing all through our life and from one life to another. Usually it takes a number of lifetimes to reach the end of the path, which is enlightenment. So the point here is contemplating death and impermanence help us to keep going until we reach enlightenment. Because we realize that, yeah, until I'm enlightened, then I will continue having to go through this experience of dying and taking rebirth again and again and again. And if we can see how unsatisfying that is, how painful that is, how, yeah, that's something we should free ourselves from, then that will incite us, impel us to keep going in our practice until we reach the end. And number 6, you will die with a peaceful, happy mind, free of regrets. So if we live our life with this awareness of impermanence and death, knowing that we're going to die, and using that awareness to live our life in a meaningful way, do things that are meaningful and beneficial, especially spiritual practice, helping others, and so on, then the way we live our life will be really nice, positive. We'll be a really good person, and we'll do a lot of good deeds, and we'll avoid doing harmful deeds. So living our life in that way, naturally, we're going to be a happier person. And then the way we, as we looked at last time, the way we live affects the way we die. So the state of mind we have as we are dying is pretty much just a continuation of the state of mind that we have during our life. So if we've been living our life with love and compassion and ethics and patience and all these good qualities, then those will be the states of mind we have as we're dying. And so, yeah, we'll be able to die with a peaceful mind, a happy mind, and free of regrets, because we haven't done a lot of harmful things, nasty things that we would look back on and feel ashamed of and regretful of. So these are some benefits that we accrue, we gain by being mindful of death. So even though it may be a little scary and uncomfortable, and we may feel some resistance, like, oh, I really don't want to do this, then it's good to look at these benefits that we will gain. Okay, so now let's go on to look at how to meditate on death. There's various ways of doing it, very different kinds of meditations or contemplations or exercises that one can do to become more mindful of death, more aware of death. But in our tradition, in the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, there's this method which is called the 9-point meditation on death. And this, I was trying to find out where it came from. It's in most of the Lamrim books. And it seems that it came from Atisha. Atisha was a great Indian master who went to Tibet in the 9th or 10th century and really helped re-establish, revitalize Buddhism, which had become somewhat degenerate. And so he's considered one of the great masters in the Tibetan tradition. And so it seems that it came from him, this 9-point meditation. And he probably compiled it, developed it based on, he was a great scholar, so he knew all the different sutras and scriptures. So probably based on his knowledge of the Buddhist teachings and the scriptural traditions, he compiled this meditation. And so the reason it's called 9-point meditation is because there are what are called 3 roots. These are like the 3 main points. And then each of those 3 has 3 points under it. So that's how it comes to 9. So the three roots are that first, death is definite, then the time of death is uncertain, and thirdly, the only thing that will help at that time is spiritual practice. So I thought that we have 3 more sessions in this course, and I thought we could take one of these 3 roots in each session, and I'll first talk about it, and then we'll do some meditation on it. And then at the end of each of the 3 roots, there are 3 conclusions or decisions that we should ideally come to after contemplating the points related to that root. And so let's look at the next slide, the first root, which is death is definite. So what this means is that it's definite that we're going to die. There's no way we can avoid it. And this might seem obvious, but even though intellectually, of course, we would say, yes, of course I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. But when it comes to our feelings or the way we live our life, we don't really accept that we're going to die. Instead, we tend to have this feeling that we're going to live forever. Yeah, we don't take death into account when it comes to making plans, right? Yeah, the plans that we make generally don't include death. We make all these plans for what we're going to do today, tomorrow, the rest of the week, next month, next year, later in life. Yeah, so we have all these ideas about what is going to happen, what we want to do, what we plan to do. We sometimes make very good plans, very detailed plans about what we want to do in the future. But normally, most people don't really plan for death, which is a rather strange thing, because of all the plans that we make, of all the things that we could do in our life, none of them are certain. I mean, it's not at all certain that any of the things we plan for or any of the things we want to do will actually happen, right? Even if we plan very well, but something could come along and interrupt our plans, and then we don't get to do that thing. So all the plans we make are actually completely uncertain. And the only thing that is really certain in our future is that we're going to die. Now, you can think about that. It probably sounds kind of shocking, but think about it. You'll probably realize, yeah, that's true. The only thing that I can be 100% sure about in the future, the rest of my, the later part of my life, the only thing that I can be really sure of is that I'm going to die. My life is going to end. Everything else is uncertain. Whether you go on that cruise, whether you have that meeting next week, whether you meet your friend for lunch tomorrow, even whether you wake up tomorrow and have breakfast and so on. None of those things is a completely certain, 100% certain that it will actually happen. Hopefully it will. It might happen, but it's not 100% sure that it will happen. Yeah, so the only thing that will happen definitely is that we're going to die. But that is something that many people don't plan for, don't take into consideration. Some people do. Some people make plans. They make a will, a living will, and so on. So some people plan for it, but a lot of people don't. So it's important that we do come to accept this fact that death is definitely going to happen. So there are 3, it says the 3 reasons. These are like 3 points to contemplate related to this root, this fact that death is definite. So the first reason is that everyone has to die. So again, that can seem very obvious, but it's still good to think about it. And what we are advised to do, and we will do this once I finish explaining it, we'll do a meditation on this. We can think about the past. And for example, people we read about or learn about in history, historical figures, Shakespeare, great artists, authors, great generals, kings, leaders, presidents, um, scientists, spiritual people like Buddha, Jesus, and so on. So we can think about these people we heard about in the past, who lived in the past, and how, well, were any of them able to avoid dying? Were any of them able to just carry on living forever without having to die? So we won't be able to find anybody that managed to avoid dying. And so, yeah, that can help bring home this fact that, yeah, whoever is born in this world eventually has to die. And then we can also think about people in our own life. We can think about our own experiences in life from the time we were born, and what people we knew who already passed away, like grandparents, some parents, friends, teachers, neighbors. Yeah, so people that we ourselves knew, had a relationship with, and how they passed away. And then bring that back to ourselves and think, just as it happened to them, it's going to happen to me. One day it will be my turn to die. So that's the point there, is to just really get a strong sense that death is something I'm going to have to face one day. And then the second is that our lifespan is always decreasing. That's the reason for this picture of the hourglass, because that's a really good kind of image to get a sense of how we have a certain amount of time to live, just as there's a certain number of grains of sand in this hourglass. And when you turn it so that the sand is at the top, then it starts to run down, like just one grain at a time. It falls down from the top to the bottom, but it's a continuous process. And eventually all the grains have run out. There's no more grains of sand in the top. It's empty. So it's kind of similar to our life. We have a certain amount of time to live, a certain number of years, months, days, and weeks, and it's running out all the time. And it's not possible to increase it. We can't increase the amount of time we have. It's just running out, decreasing all the time. And so, yeah, that can... Another way of thinking about this is that it's as if we are on some sort of vehicle, like a train or a plane, that is moving and bringing us to a particular destination. And it just keeps moving, traveling, doesn't slow down, doesn't stop. We can't get off. And so life is like that. Yeah, life is a bit like a vehicle, bringing us closer and closer to the end of our life. And there's no way we can stop this process, no way we can get off this vehicle. Yeah. So it's like we're moving continuously closer to the end of our life. And then number 3 is we have a limited amount of time for spiritual practice. So, this meditation is really meant for people who already have an interest in Dharma and following a spiritual path, doing spiritual practices. And so for such people, it's important to realize that we don't have all the time in the world for our spiritual practice. If we see that spiritual practice, like meditation, developing our mind, overcoming our afflictions, and so on, so making changes in ourselves, improving ourselves, transforming ourselves. So there's a lot of work to do, especially if you want to go all the way to the end. of the path, which is enlightenment. Yeah, that's really the goal, especially Mahayana Buddhism. Our goal is to reach enlightenment, the state that Buddha achieved. So there's a lot of things that need to be done to reach enlightenment. And so that means, since our lifespan is limited, that the amount of time we have to do spiritual practice is also limited, and it's running out all the time. And so that becomes quite startling for those who are interested in spiritual practice, but maybe don't have a strong sense of, like, that's high priority in your life. Yeah, for some people, that, Dharma practice, Dharma study and Dharma practice isn't such high priority. It's more like a hobby, something you do when you have time. When you have nothing else to do, then you do some meditation, or you study some teachings. You do some Dharma practice, and other things are more important. So but for someone who really understands the value of Dharma, the importance of Dharma practice, the importance of creating the causes for these higher states of mind, like enlightenment, then that becomes their number one priority in life, and other things become less important. But still, yeah, it's important to realize our time is limited. And so we shouldn't be kind of complacent and lazy and think, oh, never mind, I don't have to meditate now, I can do it later. I do 5 minutes of meditation, that's good enough. I mean, in some way it is, it's better to do 5 minutes of meditation than no meditation. But if we really think about all the things we need to do in our Dharma practice to reach enlightenment, and realize that we have a limited amount of time, so that can really help us overcome laziness and complacency. So the conclusion, ideally, that we come to as a result of contemplating these is, I must practice Dharma. It's really important. It's really vital that I engage in some practice of Dharma. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, even just 5 minutes a day, although the more we can do, the better. But Lama Yeshe used to say that, even just doing 5 minutes of meditation is already very good. But the point is, we should feel that Dharma practice is definitely something I should find time for in my life. And at least start taking steps along the path. Okay, so let's pause here and do a meditation on these points. So make yourselves comfortable. Try to sit up with your back straight if you can. But still be relaxed, not tense or tight. And it's also a good idea to keep your eyes open a little bit, because closing the eyes can lead to sleepiness. And if it's the end of the day and maybe you had a busy day, you might be tired. So closing the eyes could lead the mind to become sleepy, drowsy. And that's not ideal for meditation. We want to have a state of mind that's awake and alert. So keeping the eyes open a little bit and having your gaze directed down, looking down onto whatever's in front of you, your lap, a table, whatever. So that way there's some light coming into your eyes, and that can help you to stay awake and alert. Okay, so the first point, the first reason in this meditation is that everyone has to die. Death is something that happens to everyone. So start by bringing to mind people from the past. You can think of great leaders, people who were very powerful, who led countries, armies, and maybe did great things. Kings, queens, presidents, generals, and so on. And then contemplate how all those people, no matter what they did in their life, they may have done great things, but eventually their life came to an end. They became old or injured or sick, and then they died. Their life ended. You can also think about people who are very talented in various fields of arts, like musicians, writers, painters, sculptors, and so on, as well as people with brilliant minds, scientists, philosophers. And although they have these amazing talents, abilities, but they were not able to outsmart death. They were not able to find a way to keep themselves alive and avoid having to die. So they too had to die. And you can also think of great saints, spiritual practitioners, spiritual teachers, like the Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius. They too are remarkable beings with incredible wisdom and excellent qualities and practice of spiritual methods, spiritual practices. They too were not able to avoid having to die. And it's also helpful to think of people you yourself have known. You go back through your life and think of family members, teachers, friends, neighbors, people you worked with, but you actually knew, had a relationship with, who already passed away. Just as all of those people you thought about have already died, one day it will be your turn. So really try to think that, try to accept that, that one day it will be my turn to die. I too will have to die. So right now there are over 8 million people, sorry, 8 billion human beings living on this planet. 100 years from now, the vast majority of the people living on the planet right now will no longer be here, with the exception of a few infants, babies, very young children who will live more than 100. They'll still be alive, but the vast majority of all of us alive now will no longer be alive in 100 years. And then the second of the three reasons is that our lifespan is continuously decreasing. So even as we're sitting here, time is passing, minutes are passing, and as minutes pass, they turn in hours. As hours pass, they turn into days and into weeks, months, and years. So this is a continuous process that never stops. Again, it's like the sands in the hourglass running out. And as time is passing, we are getting closer to the end of our life. And it can also help to think of our life as being like riding a train or in an airplane that is moving, traveling continuously, never stops, it never slows down, and we can't get off. And this vehicle is bringing us closer and closer to its destination, which is the end of our life. I really try to get a feeling for that, how we are moving continuously towards death, towards the end of our life. Okay, then the third reason is the amount of time we have for spiritual practice, Dharma practice, is limited and is also running out each day, each hour, each minute. So the significance of this is that, according to Buddhism, spiritual practice is one way we can prepare ourselves for death. In fact, it's probably the best way to prepare ourselves for death, learning how to keep our mind positive and how to manage negative emotions like anger, attachment, and so forth, that if it were to come up at the time of death would be really unfortunate. It would be really bad to die with our mind caught up with delusions, afflictions. So if we want to avoid that, we need to learn how to manage those afflictions, decrease them, overcome them. And that's really what spiritual practice is all about, learning how to keep our mind positive in a virtuous state and keep our mind free from negative, non-virtuous experiences. So to be able to do that at the time of death, to be able to have a positive state of mind at the time of death, we have to learn how to do it now. We have to start practicing now, training ourselves now to learn how to manage our minds. And so, yeah, that's why spiritual practice is so important, to prepare ourselves for death, for the future lives, and also create the causes for higher states of mind, like enlightenment. So if you can see the value, the benefit of doing spiritual practice, learning about and doing spiritual practices, and think about how the amount of time we have to do those spiritual practices is limited. It's not that we have forever, and we have a limited amount of time, and the amount of time we have is decreasing, continuously running out. ideally, these contemplating these 3 points should give us a sense of how important it is to prepare ourselves for death by doing spiritual practice and realizing that the amount of time we have is limited. We should feel that it's imperative that we start doing Dharma practice, spiritual practice, at least spending some of our time each day learning and engaging in spiritual practice and developing it to the best of our ability. So see if that is the conclusion that you can reach after contemplating these points. And if so, you can state that to yourself in your own words and really try to generate that determination to put your energy into spiritual practice, at least some of your time each day. Do any of you have a question about that meditation or any of the things I mentioned during the meditation? Anything that's unclear? You can raise your hand.
I have one question.
Joseph, yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering, like, in what ways can we remind ourselves daily? Maybe just a brief reminder, maybe as we wake up or something, to kind of ingrain this in our minds.
Yeah, actually, the Tibetan lamas that I've heard talk about this, they say that it's a good idea. Like at the end of the day, we can, before going to bed, we can think, wow, how amazing. I'm still alive. I didn't die today. Like lots of people every day on this planet, there are many human beings who don't make it to the end of the day. They die. Something happens to them and they don't make it through the day. So to remember that and then think, wow, I'm still here. I'm still alive. That's amazing. I've lived another day and was able to do some good during that. But then to remember, but I could die during the night. It's something that happens. People sometimes just don't wake up in the morning. So to have that awareness that, death could happen to me during the night, and then try to generate a positive state of mind. They say it's really important before going to sleep to put our minds into some kind of positive state, which will affect our mind all during the night, our sleep, our dreams, and so on. So to die with a positive state of mind. To go to sleep with a positive state of mind. And then if we do wake up in the morning to, think about how, wow, here I am. I'm still alive. I didn't die last night. Isn't that wonderful? I'm still alive. And that means I have another day or part of a day at least, to engage in spiritual practice. So that's what they recommend. And I have to say, I have, I find it hard to remember that every morning and every night. But that's what they recommend. Other things you could do, you could be, use your imagination. You could write yourself notes or have pictures. To remind yourself of that. So you can, find your own ways. I have to say, when I was a child, I was raised in a Catholic family, and I learned a prayer that I guess it's common to teach children this prayer. It goes, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. So I used to recite that prayer when I was a little child. And it's interesting, isn't it? That, little kids in Catholicism are taught that. But it's a way of, putting yourself into a good state of mind, remembering death before you die, and also remembering your Jesus or God or whoever. So I still do that prayer, but I replace, I change it a little bit to make it more Buddhist. But yeah, I do that prayer. And that reminds me of, when I'm going to sleep, it's possible that I may not wake up, but I kind of I take refuge in the Buddha, put myself under the care of the Buddha, so that if I do happen to die during the night in my sleep, that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will take care of me. So I guess different people will find different ways of bringing awareness of death into their life. Anyone else? I'll leave some more time at the end if you do come up with questions. So, and the next slide has disadvantages of not being mindful of death. So this also comes from the Lamrim. And so there's a list of 6 benefits of remembering death or being mindful of death that we just went through. And then there are these 6 disadvantages of not being mindful of death. So these are like the pros and the cons, okay? Pros of remembering death, the cons of not remembering it. And so this can be helpful to, have these 2 lists and compare and think, well, what is more beneficial? Is it more beneficial for me to bring awareness of death into my life, or to completely ignore it? Not think about it, not be mindful of it. Okay, so the disadvantages, first is you will not remember the Dharma or spiritual practice. So this means that if we never think about death and live our life as if we're going to be here forever, which is what happens to many people. They live their life as if it's never going to end, as if death is never going to happen to them. They have all these plans and just are completely focused on this present life, never think about death and, prepare for death. So that's what a lot of people do. So living in that way, then you may not see any value, any benefit in doing any spiritual practice. So you get totally caught up in this life, in your work, your relationships, your social life, your hobbies, traveling. There's endless things we can do in our life, and endless ways we can spend our time. And so you'll just be, spend all your time doing those things and not spend any time preparing for death, preparing for the next life, preparing for higher states of mind. Okay, so this is one of the dangers of not being mindful of death. Just not thinking about Dharma, spiritual practice. And then second, even if you do remember the Dharma, you won't practice it. Okay, so this would refer to people who do know about Dharma. And they may have learned it from their family or their culture, or reading books and so on. So we have some knowledge of Dharma practice, meditation practice, and so on. We know about it, but we don't do it. Okay, so this can easily happen. Yeah, I think there's so much material available, like books. When I first started learning Buddhism back in the 70s, there were only a handful of Buddhist books in English. And now there's hundreds, maybe thousands of Buddhist books. And then there's the internet and online courses and YouTube talks that you can listen to. I mean, you could spend 24 hours a day learning Dharma. And so, yes, people might learn a lot of Dharma, know a lot of Dharma, like intellectually, but may not get around to actually practicing it. It's practicing Dharma, like meditating or applying the Dharma teachings to yourself, your mind, your life, that's harder. Yeah, that takes more effort. Just acquiring information isn't very difficult, but putting it into practice is difficult. And so this is something that may happen if we don't remember death, if we live our life as if we're never going to die, as if we're going to be here forever. And number 3, even if you practice Dharma, you will not practice purely. Okay, so this refers to people who are doing some Dharma practice. Maybe they're doing some meditation, or maybe they've received some tantric empowerments and they're doing tantric practices, visualizations, recitations of mantras, sutras, and so on. So they're actually doing some Dharma practice. However, the practice may not be pure. So the meaning of pure is our mind being free of worldly motivations, worldly kind of aspirations, like the 8 worldly dharmas. So the 8 worldly dharmas these are attitudes we have. It's like 4 pairs of opposites. So there's 4 things that we are attached to, long for, try to get, because we see them as desirable. And those are gain, like material gain, wanting to have money, wanting to have things, and so on. And then fame, like being known, people knowing us, who we are, and about us, and so on. And then praise. Praise is when people, say nice things to us, about us. Complimenting us, saying we're such a good person, we're so smart, we're so cool, whatever. So wanting those kind of words from others. And then pleasure, pleasant experiences, like, seeing beautiful things, hearing beautiful sounds, tasting beautiful tastes, physical sensations. So sensory pleasures. So those are the 4 things that we like, that we want, that we run after, we try to acquire in our life. Gain, fame, praise, and pleasure. And then there's the set of 4 opposites to those. things that we don't like and we want to avoid, we try very hard to make sure they don't happen in our life. And those are the opposites. So loss or not gaining, not getting what we want. And then opposite to fame could be being nobody, being like unknown, nobody knows anything about you. Or it could also be bad reputation. You know, people know about you, but they think badly of you. Yeah, they have a bad impression of you. And then opposite of praise would be criticism and blame. People saying things about us that are unpleasant to hear. And yeah. And then the opposite of pleasure is unpleasant experiences, painful or unpleasant experiences. And so those are the 4 things we want to avoid. And so they say that, yeah, we all have these. We're concerned about these 8 things, getting the 4 good things, avoiding the 4 bad things. And a lot of our activities, a lot of our decisions and choices and so on are involved with these 8 worldly concerns. And if it's possible that even our Dharma practice, our spiritual practice, could become polluted by these worldly concerns. For example, wanting to be liked, wanting to be known as somebody who's a good practitioner, who's knowledgeable, right? And so that attitude could creep into our Dharma practice, like you're studying Dharma and you kind of hope that people will notice how much you know and how good you are at meditation and how devoted you are to your teacher. You're doing all the right things. And so, you know, wanting everyone to notice that, be impressed with you. So that's one example of how our practice can become impure. That's not the right motivation we should have for practicing Dharma. Okay, our practice of Dharma ideally should be free of such worldly concerns, worldly attitudes. They're very much about the ego, about me, and self-centeredness, you know, wanting all the good things for myself, wanting to get rid of all the bad things for myself, not caring so much about others. So yeah, so if we don't remember death, then it's possible that our practice could become corrupted, polluted by worldly concerns. Another example would be money. This may not happen so much to people except those who are teaching Dharma, but you know, people who are teaching Dharma, writing books, you know, getting kind of Dharma work where they have the opportunity to earn money. So then it's possible that greed could come in, you know, well, if I do more of this, then I'll get even more money, and so on. And so that again is an example of Dharma practice, Dharma work becoming polluted and impure. I always think of there was this one Christian televangelist many years ago. I don't remember his name, but he was very famous, very popular. You know, he had his own TV station or whatever, and he was, you know, preaching and asking people to send money, and he was very successful. So he got lots of money. And then it was found that he did something illegal. He didn't pay his taxes, or he cheated on his accounts or whatever. He did something corrupt and got into trouble, and I think even went to jail. So it was kind of a big scandal and in the news. And I read an article about it, and a friend of his said that in the beginning, this guy loved people and used money. But in the end, he loved money and used people. So I think that's a really good and sad, of course, example of how, even if we start off with good motivation, good intentions in our spiritual practice and spiritual work, it's so easy to become corrupted, because we do have this strong tendency to be greedy and to want, people to like us, to love us, to be famous and so on. So once you start getting a little taste of that, then it's so easy to go off on the wrong track. Okay, so yeah, and remembering death will help us to avoid that, because all of the worldly things like money and wealth and fame and so on, all of those things are left behind when we die. They don't go with us to our next life. And so they're very temporary, very transitory, and not at all beneficial for our spiritual goals, for the attainment of higher states of mind, realizations, enlightenment, and so on. And so, yeah, contemplating death can help us to realize that and help us to cut those attachments and realize, no, those things are not worth being concerned about, being attached to. And that will help us keep our practice pure. And then number 4, our practice will not be persistent. So this means that, yeah, we may practice in spurts. We have spurts of energy. Yeah, there's certain days where we have a lot of energy to practice Dharma, but then, other days we don't have so much energy. Or, yeah, there may be times when we're very enthusiastic for a while, but then, we lose our energy and don't have so much enthusiasm to practice. So this is one of the dangers if we don't remember death. So if we remember, the fact that this life is going to end at some point, and we really don't know when it's going to end. So it's really, it could happen any time. So that will give us a strong incentive to keep going in our practice and not lose energy, not give up, but just really practice regularly. And then number 5 is you will create many unwise negative actions. So this isn't necessarily the case, but it could happen that if we don't remember death and, take that seriously, that this life is going to end at some point, then we might, be careless about our ethics, about our karma, and think, oh yeah, I can tell this little lie, or I steal this little thing, or whatever, harm people. It doesn't matter. And so then, we accumulate negative karma. And that in turn leads to number 6, is having regrets at the time of death. So if we do engage in unwise negative actions, then looking back on those when we're dying, we will feel sad, we'll feel regret. And we may also feel regret about the way we wasted our time, that we didn't do more Dharma practice when we had the chance to do so. So dying with that kind of regret would not be such a positive state of mind. Much better to die looking back at life and feeling good about the way we spent our time, the things that we did, and feel a sense of satisfaction about the way we lived our life. So it's good to contemplate these and recognize that, if we don't practice this mindfulness of death, then these things may happen to us. Okay, so I thought I did add the slide for the next. This is the second route of the 9-point meditation on death. And we don't have time to do this meditation today, but I thought to at least introduce it. And then next week, next class, we'll do a meditation on it. And Lama Tsongkhapa says this is actually the most important thing to think about, to contemplate, to understand that the time of death is uncertain. Because, with the first point, it's hard to argue. Yeah, we can't really argue with the fact that we're going to die. Of course, we know we're going to die. However, our mind may sort of play tricks on us and say things like, yes, I know I'm going to die, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. I'm healthy. Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm healthy. I don't have cancer. I don't have heart disease, And so we may think being healthy is a guarantee that we have a long time to live and that death isn't going to happen soon. But that's not true, because perfectly healthy people can die before people who have a terminal illness. Because there's so many ways that death can happen. It isn't just through illness. Yeah, it's not just sick people who die, healthy people die too. Okay, so that's one kind of delusion we have to clear out of our mind. Another one we might have is that related to our age. You may think, we're not very old. It's only old people who die. Yeah, people who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, oh, they're going to die soon. But I'm only 30 or 40 or whatever. So, I have a long time to live. But that's also not true. It's not just old people who die, young people die too. Okay. So the three reasons, I'll just briefly talk about them. And then, like I say, we'll meditate on them next time. So the three reasons are: first, human lifespan is uncertain. There's no certainty about how much time a human being has to live. Okay. We're not guaranteed a certain number of years of life. They talk about life expectancy, which is, on average, a human being in this country might live to this age. That's just average, but that's not a guarantee. Okay, lots of people don't live to that age. So there's no certainty about the lifespan of a human being. People can die at all different ages. Babies. Just recently, we were asked to pray for a little child who was less than 2 years old, I think only a year and a half old, and fell into a swimming pool and drowned. Okay, so we know that. We know babies die, little kids die, teenagers die, people in their 20s die, people in their 30s die. So, it's like any age at all could be an age at which one dies. And then number two, there are many causes of death. Okay, so according to statistics, the number one causes of death are usually illness, like heart disease, cancer, strokes. But there are other things that can happen, like accidents, car accidents, plane crashes, industrial accidents, accidents at work. Even just walking down the street, you could be hit by a car, or riding a bicycle, you could be hit by a car. Accidents can happen in the home. Sometimes we feel safe in our home, but there are things that can happen. People get electrocuted, or there's a gas leakage, or a fire. Okay, so even at home, in the safety of our home, things can happen that cause death. So there's many different ways that death happens to people. And then number three is that our human body and life are actually very fragile. We may feel strong and full of energy, but it doesn't take much. I mean, just look at coronavirus. That killed millions of people. And a virus is so tiny, it can't even be seen with the naked eye. It's microscopic. But that was getting into people's bodies and wreaking havoc. And sometimes in a very short time, they were dead. Even young, healthy people were dying. So it doesn't take something huge and dramatic like a tsunami or a volcanic eruption or a tiger to kill you. Okay, even something extremely tiny can become the cause of death. So life is actually quite fragile. So those are the points, but we'll talk more about them next time and do a meditation on it. And this idea that the time of death is uncertain is really, really powerful, really something we need to bring home. Because it's true, we really just don't know when it's going to happen, when our life is going to end. And that, realizing that is a strong incentive to start practicing Dharma now and not wait, not think, okay, I got time. I'll do it later, next year, when I retire, when the kids grow up. But no, there's no guarantee we are going to live that long. Okay, so I guess I kind of went over well, we still have time, but is there any question that you'd like to ask before we finish? You can also send them.
So I have a question. I live in New York, and when people are handing out religious pamphlets on the subway, I always take them because I find them interesting to read. And I find, my family's heritage is also Catholicism. I find that, a lot of these Christian pamphlets really use fear a lot as a motivator, fear of punishment, fear of hell. And so I'm wondering in Buddhism, like, what is the line between, keeping in mind death as like a positive motivating factor versus fear? Like, oh no, I'll be condemned to countless, reincarnations if I don't get on the enlightenment path as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. And being brought up in Catholicism, I'm kind of sensitive to that, as are many, many of us who are brought up in that religion. We're kind of get a little bit triggered sometimes by some of the Buddhist teachings. So we have to know how to work with that. I guess, given we have limited time, I'll talk more about this next time. But there's actually a book called Wholesome Fear, co-authored by Lama Zopa Rinpoche and myself. And it includes some teachings by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And he kind of explains that, I mean, we do have fear of death. I think the vast majority of people do feel afraid of death. And maybe because we're not facing it right now, we're not aware of that fear. We don't see it, but it is there. I mean, if you're in an accident or almost in an accident or in a plane and it starts to run into turbulence, that fear comes up. I mean, when we're confronted with death, it does come up. So we do have fear of death. And he says that what we should fear is not death itself. Death itself isn't something to be afraid of. But what we should fear is dying without having done anything to prepare ourselves. Dying with an uncontrolled mind. I mean, that's what I see when I ask myself, what am I afraid of with regard to death? Why am I afraid of death? And I see that what I'm afraid of is not being able to manage my mind, not being able to manage the thoughts and the emotions that might come up at that time of death, and not being able to have a positive state of mind. That's what I'm afraid of. So I'm afraid of an uncontrolled negative state of mind at the time of death. And so that fear, recognizing that fear, is an incentive for me to learn how to work on my mind now, how to manage my mind, how to manage my thoughts and my emotions, so that I know how to deal with those things and I don't have to let myself be overcome by them. And so the point I'm trying to make is that if we look at our fear of death and we ask ourselves, what can I do about it? Is there something I can do about it? There are things we can do to prepare ourselves for death so we don't have a uncontrolled negative state of mind at that time, and we can even have a positive and peaceful state of mind at that time. And so the fear, recognizing the fear and what we're afraid of, can then lead us to do things to prepare ourselves for it. Okay, I'll say more about this next time, but yeah. kind of-
Thank you.
But yeah, it's a good point that you made. Okay, so we'll stop there. And if you do have other questions that come up, you can email them to Sheila, I guess, to the center, and then she'll send them to me and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's just make a mental dedication of the positive energy we've created by coming together, spending this time together, looking at this very important topic. So we started off with an altruistic intention, wanting to benefit other people, other beings. So let's share the positive energy we've created, that it will become beneficial for all beings, every living being. May it help them all become free of suffering and the causes of suffering, which are the delusions, the afflictions, negative states of mind. And may they all achieve real peace and happiness and its causes, which are the positive virtuous states of mind. And may it help all beings quickly become enlightened. Okay, so thank you for joining, and
Thank you, Venerable.
see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Venerable. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.